Hi, I'm Gordon Raquel from Filmmaker U. At Filmmaker U, we create courses for film professionals to deepen and diversify your existing skill set. You can learn more at filmmakeru.com or, of course, follow us on Instagram at filmmaker_u. Every week, we interview a film professional to discuss their work, and this week I'm joined by editor Nic Zimmermann, whose work includes Tyson Fury, Gypsy King, Mumbai Mafia, Cops versus the Underworld, and more recently, The Greatest Night in Pop for Netflix. Welcome to the show, Nick.
Hi, thank you. Great to be here.
So my first question for you is, how did you get involved with this documentary, The Greatest Night in Pop?
So I've done a few films with Dorothy Street Pictures, who produced the film, and so I did. It was A Fight Before Christmas with them and Super Eagles, and so Julia Nottingham got in touch with me, and yeah, we kind of went from there. She introduced me to the director Bar, and he pitched it from his perspective, which was brilliant in that he kind of wanted to frame the film as a heist movie, basically. So in that sense, I thought, wow, this is a really exciting project, and it sounds like a great angle on it too.
So what aspects then did you take of a heist movie and sort of wrap into this edit? Because that's not something you usually do in a doc about musicians.
Well, I guess it's kind of like we introduced the idea of the ticking clock and kind of like the impossibility of the task at hand, which was to kind of get the some of the best artists of the time to record the song in one night. So that was kind of like the heist element to it.
I grew up in a household in the projects in East Harlem. There's a program at WNET, the public television station, to get more people of color behind the camera in the editing room doing sound, writing scripts. When they put me in a dark room and they showed me how to use the splicer and the rewinds, I felt this big sigh of relief, this sense of, wow, I found my space. The editing part of filmmaking is the real nuts and bolts of what makes films come to life. You can ask Spielberg, you can ask Tarantino, you can ask Spike. When you sit here, this is where the proof is in the pudding. I'm Sam Pollard, and this is my class on documentary editing.
One of my questions was about the clock, the ticking clock, and how that sort of builds the tension for us through this doc. So I'm wondering, um, like, did you go to the clock more? Like, how did you sort of structure that through the film to make it flow so nicely?
Well, I guess we kind of wanted it to be very much in the moment, even though it's an archive film. We wanted to kind of feel like we were there, and it was all unfolding as you were watching it, and so that's where it goes from concept and then kind of giving the idea that this was the only time they would be able to do it and get all these artists into a room together would be on the night of the American Music Awards, and so that was kind of what gets the clock ticking, I guess, and then to keep people in that frame, to keep it kind of like exciting and unfolding. Yeah, we just kind of rolled with that.
So okay, so you mentioned the director and working with him, and in one of the interviews I found with him, um, they talked about the importance of humor in the film. So I'm wondering if you could sort of highlight what he was talking about because he didn't really go into it, and I'm wondering, what elements or what did you craft in terms of humor in this?
So I guess I mean humor for me in most of my films is quite a key part of what I do, and so I kind of approached it where I kind of broke down a lot of the scenes into almost giving it like a joke structure. So
Hmm.
with a setup and a payoff punchline. So things like where Stevie's kind of wanting to introduce the Swahili into the song, and
Yes.
the whole build-up of that is basically where Lionel's going. Under no circumstances should anyone deviate from the plan, and then hard cut to kind of Woolly Mongo was to just everything was sort of kind of laid out in a way that can kind of like pay off into a gag basically, and yeah, so hopefully that kind of humor came across.
were you guys, was there discussions about, because I was thinking there's like that John Denver joke at one point, like who's John Denver? Um, were you guys worried about hurting people's feelings at any point in with those types of jokes, or like was it sort of, I guess, not open season, but like it's already happened, it's they're aware of it already. Is it okay to make these types of jokes?
No, I think we were always very sensitive to, how these things would come across, and we weren't trying to kind of like step on any toes or anything like that. And this was purely a fun, nostalgic film, and that was
Hmm.
always the directive for us.
Thinking of it as a fun and nostalgic film, who was the person you were most excited to see in this film and cut in terms of musicians?
I mean,
Because there's so many good ones.
I know it's a really hard one. I mean, I have to say that Lionel Richie is just one of my favorite people on earth. He's just
Yeah,
amazing. Such an incredible storyteller.
yeah.
Uh, so, I mean, you didn't really have to try very hard to kind of get the humor right. I mean, he was just laying it out in heaps, and that was great fun.
Oh, and I love the joke at the end where he goes home and everyone's like, "What was the music awards like?" And they had no idea what he had just done. Um, what so one of the things I really liked about the documentary is you have this big moment in history, and yet you guys sort of do these little uh you capture these tiny moments. So like I think about Bob Dylan and how it's revealed like, oh, he isn't a traditional singer. And here we are putting him in a situation that makes him uncomfortable. And then throughout the film, you're sort of highlighting that with these shots of him very uncomfortable. So, like, when you guys set those up, because there was a couple of them, did you guys plan for those, or did you guys discover them and start building them? How did that work?
I mean, he was kind of a bit of the most uncomfortable guy in the room in a way that,
Hmm.
he didn't really sometimes intentionally always show those shots. He just kind of, if he was in a shot, he was uncomfortable, I guess.
Hmm.
But, it was more about how his problems on the night, and sort of, having to kind of work out what his role in the song was, ultimately leads to kind of the biggest moment of them coming together as a family, basically, with Stevie Wonder helping him at the piano.
Hmm.
But a lot of these moments that come out in the film were kind of not as easy to kind of build up as you might think. It wasn't all laid out as, as kind of how normal archive generally would be. When
Hmm.
they filmed the actual recording, I think, the cameras weren't recording all the audio that was happening. So all those chats that we got in the room, they actually came from the audio of a dictaphone that was there, that from a reporter, for Time, I think it was Time Life magazine,
Oh, wow.
David Breskin. And so this dictaphone didn't have any time code or anything, so we had to kind of like meticulously kind of go through all this audio and connect it back to the footage. Um, and at times we didn't even have the shots that we needed, so we'd kind of build the scene up and build around it to kind of create those moments. So we found the moments often in the audio first,
Hmm.
or where someone spoke about it at interview, and then kind of did the magic art of editing to kind of bring those moments alive.
Probably one of the smartest things I've ever done for my career. It gave me all the tools that I needed to be able to jump into a new career.
Getting myself into a mindset, thinking like an editor, and being around people that I can talk to on that level was really invaluable to me.
A lot of the things that I learned from that class, I still think about.
I loved the classroom. I loved the computer stations. We built a sense of community.
And it also instills a lot of confidence in you to take that and go out into the world.
After I took the class, I felt very prepared to take the next step.
I owe Manhattan Workshop the career that I have right now.
Things have been going great, and I really have the Manhattan Workshop to thank for that.
Well, that's remarkable because I think about the other sort of like little moment is will Prince show up and his girlfriend at the time, and how they're sort of, she's like sitting on the stair, I think, or one of the steps, and she's like talking about her frustration with it. So you guys like that happens. It obviously happened. But you guys were like building that type of thing up through the footage from throughout.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that was a moment we had that was probably quite thin on video footage, and so you really had to kind of dig in and find shots that would sort of show that moment. And yeah, if you look closely, like it kind of, you can see sometimes where it's slightly outside of the chronological order because they would be back on the rafters on the stands again or whatever for those moments, but just where you could get that look from them or see them in that moment. So for Sheila, for example.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it was a fun story to kind of build the will you won't he turn up for Prince.
Yeah, well, I love the tension that you put in there, right? Because it's like, oh, he might show up, even though we all know the history.
Yeah,
Which,
it's kind of it's funny. We had a kind of extended version of that scene at one point where
yeah,
we actually had a journalist, like a paparazzi kind of guy, who was staking out Carlos and Charlie's, waiting for Prince to come out because he couldn't get a pass to get into the studio, and this was the biggest thing happening that
yeah,
night. And so we kind of jumped out of in an extended scene. We kind of jumped out with him, and he's waiting, and Prince comes out, and he's got his big bodyguard chick, and they actually, I think, got accosted, and their cameras taken away from them because they were taking photos, and Prince didn't like that. And so yeah, there was more to that, but we kind of ultimately felt that it was taking out the room too much, and we felt that the story was enough there already for trying to get Prince in the room and what that would mean for the song and everything. So we opted to kind of cut that one slightly shorter.
So what I find that interesting because is there in documentaries you might have hundreds of hours, if not even thousands. So were there things like that that got cut that you were like, I really like this, it just doesn't fit the time or the story arc or the moment? Was there anything that sort of stood out that you wish you could have kept?
Um, I mean, I think it was ultimately everything that was in the room we were really, really happy with when they were actually recording it. The things that we had to really tighten a bit more were the build up to the night and getting into the room, because it's although it's fun and exciting, and that's where most of the kind of heist build up aspect came. We felt that it was taking too long, and the best, obviously the best stuff is once you're in the room with them. So yeah, there was probably a bit more fleshed out versions of the front half of the film before.
Interesting. What I sort of mentioned this earlier, like we all know the outcome, but like how did you work with the director and what the footage you have to keep us still on the edge of our seat and sort of keep us hooked as to what's going to happen?
I guess we just kind of found those moments of doubt with each well, not each artist, with as many artists as we could. So with Bruce Springsteen just finishing his tour in Buffalo, and the storms that were raging over there, so they were worried that his flight would get cancelled. So we were not only building the tension of whether they would or would not be able to do it, but who would even be able to, who would come. I mean, I don't know. There was so many moments of how we kind of were just trying to build that in, and it all comes back down to that kind of heist aspect that we're trying to keep going in.
Interesting. Was there like was there a particular scene that was difficult to edit or that you were really proud of the edit and how it came out?
One of the scenes that were the easiest was probably the Michael Jackson scene when he's singing on his own at the studio while everybody's still at the American Music Awards, because it was just such a beautiful sort of intimate moment with him all alone in the studio, and you could see his discomfort even though he's on his own. But I think it was mostly that scene was probably very much on its first cut was almost what you see in the final film, because we just wanted to keep it raw and honest, and that really didn't change all the way to the end. So that was probably one of the easiest scenes to cut it cut itself in a way.
Now I have to ask about Dan Aykroyd. How was there more to his role in this, or because it was kind of it's funny because like a friend of mine watched it and he was like, "Why is Dan Aykroyd in there?" I'm like, "The Blues Brothers." Like,
Yeah, exactly. So yeah,
so
I think we did have a slightly more fleshed out explanation of why it was there before, and when we were actually sort of, I guess, slightly kicking ourselves for pulling it up because it's something that everybody brings up, like in a lot of the reviews and what everybody's saying is it's so random, but yeah, everybody just wants to know why was Dan Aykroyd in the room. But as you say, he was yeah, it was the Blues Brothers, and
and they were huge at the time,
yeah,
right?
yeah, it's grateful.
So he's got to get the band back together, maybe with an with a couple other people.
Yeah.
Um, Now there was like those phone calls or the recordings of the phone calls. I was gonna ask, like, were those actual recordings or were they recreations? It felt like, how did you get the phone calls?
So the audio from those phone calls came from the David Breskin dictaphone
Oh, okay.
recordings that I'd mentioned earlier. So he was actually sort of following along with Ken Cragen and in the studios with Quincy and stuff.
Yeah.
So it was all real phone calls that he actually recorded of him speaking to various people as he was reaching out.
Oh,
And,
interesting.
and then Bao, the director, he basically he like basically went out and filmed like reconstruction for those. So we had visuals that we could sort of show, um, like the logistics meeting when they're sort of discussing, don't let it out where this is going to happen or it's going to be over before it's even started, kind of thing.
Mhm.
So yeah, so the audio itself was all real. Yeah.
Now, when you start tackling a documentary, right? Because whenever I've talked to a doc editor, everyone sort of approaches it differently. Like there's some who like to put everything in the timeline and slowly chip it away. Some like to just grab a scene and start working on that and trying to hone that down. How do you like to approach a doc? Because it's got so much footage coming in.
So that's a really tricky one. I guess we kind of have like a rough like story beat set
Mhm.
up for the film, and we've worked a lot of work's gone into that before I even start. So that a lot of it changes, but it gives you like a foundation to begin working from. So a lot of the sort of setup, build up scenes that were all there, and we also used David Breskin's book as a reference because he wrote the official Wheel the World book too. And a lot of these sort of inside stories of what actually happened in the studio, we were like, oh wow, this and this happened. So we kind of built that in, and when Bar went to go interview the artists, he obviously asked them, and so we got that. And yeah, I guess it was a bit of that, and then so you have your story beats, and you flesh them out with the interviews as they shot, because you don't have all the interviews to begin with either. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's kind of an organic process in that way. And yeah, then for myself, I tend to kind of really build a lot of playlists just on Spotify or whatever, and
Oh, interesting.
themed playlists. So I'd have sort of heist themes, drama, tension, comedy, and whatever, and then they're all temp, and then we sort of use that to cut with, and then the composer would compose original music for us for the film.
Now I have actually I have two last questions, which are I told you I had one that was my last question usually, but I have two now. These are all 80s icon musicians. And depending on the person you talk to, some people love the 80s music scene and some people hate the 80s music scene. So I'm wondering who's your go-to 80s music musician that you listen to?
Me, wow. I mean, back then, I mean, I think Bruce Springsteen. I mean,
Yeah.
I guess I've got more of a rock sensitivities or whatever. Bruce Springsteen. I remember. I mean, he's one of the earliest memories of music I actually have. When I was a kid, I
Mhm.
remember my dad would be playing it in the car, and we'd be on road trips. And Born in the USA would just be like on loop, basically. So yeah, he's just got like such a huge sort of. It's such a huge memory for me
Yeah.
from music from the 80s. Yeah.
And then my last question is, what is your favorite guilty pleasure film or TV show to watch?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say kind of it's a movie or a TV series, but I love watching trailers. Like, so I'll literally just be able to sit down and I could watch new movie trailers or documentary trailers forever until I have to actually get called off to do something else, because yeah, it's just it inspires me to see what people are doing, and it's a concise version of you know, what it's all about. It's just something
My wife and I are the same way. You could
Right.
spend hours watching. The frustrating thing is, I don't know if you have Apple TV, but their new trailer tool just sends you to the Apple app,
Right.
and
No.
it doesn't work the way it used to, which was so nice because you could just flip through and see what's up. But
Yeah, that's a bummer, isn't it?
well, thank you so much for letting me interview today.
No, cool. Thank you very much for having me.
That's it. And thanks for watching, everyone. I'm Gordon Burkell from Filmmaker U. You can get us at filmmakeru.com or, of course, on Instagram at filmmakeru.com. Thanks for watching.